What's up, YouTube? Welcome. Today's topic is... Oh, I didn't write in the title in my notes correctly. So let us edit this document. We're talking about time. And not just time in general, but timekeeping and the evolution thereof. Let's update. There we go. Timekeeping. Years, clocks, computers, and more. So, how did we get into this topic, and how are all of these things related? Let's see. Yesterday, our stream was on Empire. And throughout history, perhaps one of the unifying factors of empires and how they might be different from nations is the standardization of measurements. Standardization of weights, measures, language, writing systems, all this sort of stuff has been one of the ways in which we define an empire. And so you could contrast like a whole bunch of different city-states, all with their different systems and ways of doing things, with an empire in which there could be more efficiency, there could be bigger structures, there could be all sorts of stuff like that in an empire by virtue of standardization, which allows interchange of more goods, more services, greater diversity of developing things, and so on and so forth. So, like, just I'm an American. One thing that people diss on America for is that we use the so-called imperial, what do you call it? Imperial measurements, something like that, as opposed to the metric system. So we use these old British units, whereas most of the world will use the metric system. Anyways, so in that regard, America is kind of different. You could say America's parochial, more a town, local-ish, whereas you have the rest of the world using the metric system. You could say that they're better integrated via this system of standardized weights and measures. Okay. So perhaps more than anything, timekeeping is one area in which all modern nations, all pretty much everyone, we could say we're running on the same clock. And there's a literal sense in which that's true. When it comes to computers, which we'll be talking about, because how many different operating systems and stuff are there. There's certain internet services, computer things that everybody uses, and all of these systems rely heavily on clocks. So we'll be talking about clocks. And I also want to point out, so we think of clocks in terms of mechanical clocks or digital clocks in this current age, and we'll be talking a lot more about this. But throughout history, perhaps the main reference point people had for keeping track of time, and they didn't do it by hours and seconds and minutes like we do now. Instead, you would refer to the sun, the moon, the stars. So I've yet to do the really big deep dive on this subject. But if you do look at the development of clocks of various sorts, you'll come across lots of interesting things. Like this one, for example, the Prague Astronomical Clock. Here I think you have like the zodiac signs. So these will be as they correspond to constellations in the sky. You could see them changing positions at regular cycles. And so I haven't studied all of this enough to be able to explain to you all clearly how this works, but I thought that it was interesting to see how various clocks and stuff have been used or have been created with forms mirroring celestial bodies and things, because you could say these are the sorts of original clocks that we have used as humans, using the lights in the sky to keep track of different things. Anyways, so perhaps this is a different topic for another day. I'm sure you could find some very in-depth analyses of these things. As a typical urban dweller, suburban born type person, I actually did not have much experience like looking up and studying the night sky. So I can't say that I've ever actually used one of these. I'm used to looking at like clocks on the wall. Or now most people, they don't even have clocks on the wall all the time. You'll check your phone or something for the time. But that's an unusual state of affairs. So that's why that's one of the reasons this topic is interesting to me, to say, all right, as modern people with computers everywhere, the way that we look at it and we conceptualize time is the exception rather than the rule for much of history of how people have considered this stuff. Just by definition, that, you know, our computers and stuff are relatively new technology. So assuming that there weren't some ancient lost computers or something, or past civilizations of that sort, assuming we didn't have that, then I think it would be safe to say that our modern ways of looking at and keeping track of time are rather exceptional. So let's look at how we got here. But first, words of the day. So I chose 2 words related to time. First word from Latin is the word for year, annus. And oftentimes you'll see it in used as anno or annos. So to sentence here, viginti annos natus est. He is 20 years old. 20 years born is. Ab hinc duo annos factum est. It happened 2 years ago. So I'm not good enough with the verbs in that grammar, but something like happen, ago, 2 years, it was, something like that. And another interesting note, so now we're all used to having 12 months, and I'll just throw in as a side note that in East Asia, functionally speaking, for all business and kind of life as you would encounter it if you didn't like go away to some very remote farming community or something, everybody's kind of on the same calendar pretty much. And we'll get into this talking about the internet. So now we're all pretty much on the same calendar. But this 12-month system we have is not even it's pretty old, but it's not like old, super old. It's like pretty old. So here I just have a quote. In ancient Rome, the word annus originally meant 10 months, which was the duration of the Roman year, from the month Martius to December, 304 days. So just note here that March would be the beginning of the year, and then it would go through December. With the remaining 2 months of winter, so after December, now we call that January and February. not assigned to a specific month. So kind of like the dead winter of the year, something like that. This later came to mean 12 months, as the calendar was rearranged by Numa Pompilius, who added January and February to the start of the year. Many centuries later, Augustus Caesar renamed the months of Quintilius and Sextilius to July and August after his adoptive father Julius Caesar, so July, and himself, August, because he's Augustus Caesar. But neither Julius Caesar nor Augustus were responsible for increasing the year to 12 months. So I guess if you look at the names for the months, and like October, it's easy to see the octo, like octopus. November, Spanish nueve, so 9. December, dec, 10. But then some of the months, like here, it's talking about how July and August are different. So that is that. Okay, so Latin word. Now you could recognize it as it comes up. And then in Greek, we have this word χρόνος, where we get like chrono from in English, like chronometry, chronometer. The science of accurate time measurement. So this chrono comes from the Greek chronos, which means time. So there we go. We have studied ourselves some classics. Let us get into the topic. So how did people keep track of time? Specifically, I was more interested in looking at years, like dating. We all say that we're in the year 2021. But how did this come about? And in fact, there are a bunch of different calendars in use today, but the Gregorian calendar, I think, is what we're using now, is the dominant for civil life. But here we could see Wikipedia gives like the year 2021. So our current year, how is this called in different calendars? So you've probably heard of like the Chinese calendar, the Chinese New Year. So we're in the year of metal rat and metal ox, depending what time of the year we're in. And Japanese, they recently turned to a new era as measured by their emperors, their royalty. So this one, Reiwa, is the current era of Japan's official calendar. Begin on the 1st of May 2019, the day on which Emperor Akihito's elder son Naruhito ascended the throne as the 126th Emperor of Japan. And before this Reiwa period, we could take a look at the other Japanese periods that have been in our where's the calendar? I'm trying to look for the nice list. We're joined by a visitor. Viata says the second Latin sentence is since from this time 2 years has happened. Okay, so that's okay, yeah. Pink since 2 annos, since from 2 years happened. Factum est, happened. Alright, that's good. We have some real Latin knowledge, not just people like me who learned a bit of Spanish and are trying to wing the Latin as we're going. Anyways, let's get back on topic. We don't have to weeb out with the specifics of... Oh no, we found it. Okay, we could weeb out a little bit. So we're going to go all the way down. So as you could see, in Japan, they've had a written record for a long time. You could ask the question, why is it that in the world generally there's certain civilizations we talk about more than others? And one of the reasons is, certain civilizations have left more written records, or they're a bigger civilization who has left more written records. So for whatever reason, the East Asian nations, specifically, China, Japan, and even Korea, and maybe Vietnam, you could count some other places. They call this the Sinosphere, because they all use these Chinese character writing systems. They've recorded a lot. Okay, so like within my lifetime, I exited the age of Heisei, and then we entered into the era of Reiwa. So here we're in the Reiwa year 3, but then a while ago we would have been in like Heisei year of 28. Then here's some other eras, and if you look up some of these names, like here, this one Showa. Like if I go on YouTube and you search for some of these eras, then they have a different look and feel. And you could see, for example, people will talk, they'll show like music and images saying like, oh yeah, that was how life was during the Showa period. So now, on the internet culture in the West, we talk about millennials, boomers, zoomers, and so on and so forth. Japanese people, they could talk about, oh yeah, you don't remember life before Heisei. And that's actually their official calendar. So it's like, we're like boomers, zoomers, and millennials. But then in Japan, they actually have like a pretty official way to refer to different generations, I guess is one way to put it. Like you could say they're literally generations in the sense that the different eras come about with changes in their emperor, who's a person with a lifespan. So anyways, that's interesting. So, how did people start to count years? I'll generalize this like beyond saying like we're in the year 2021 AD. What are some other ways that people have counted years? So I pulled up, oh, this is interesting. This is actually that clock in Prague that I showed at the beginning. So here's an article by an amateur historian guy, but I thought it was pretty informative. So how did people do this? So one way is talking about the reign of kings. So here I'll just read this text. The most common way to count the years was to tie the date to the current ruler, king, or emperor. This is readily apparent in many ancient texts, including the Bible. Passages will begin with the phrase, in X year of the reign by Y ruler, giving the reader the place and time. The reign of kings and emperors was carefully tracked and charted, right? So genealogies, things like this. If you read some ancient texts, you will probably run into this. Like in the Bible, there's a lot of these. For the learned of the population, the years of the current ruler's reigns were just as easily understood as our current dating system, right? Because you live in a place, you know who's in charge, the general history of it. And yes, this practice can be seen all over the globe in ancient times. The ancient Jews used it, and the Romans used it, the Japanese and Chinese used it, and it's called the regnal year. After the reign, the ruler, the royalty. Yeah. So one of the interesting things, if you read like Wikipedia, Wikipedia kind of represents the establishment, settled account of something. So like we were looking at the Japanese, the Reiwa thing, and we know like the Reiwa era because we're all living in the same timeline. The translation of the years is pretty accurate, right? So we know like this matches up with this Heisei 1989 to 2019, but as you go further back, then you could expect there to be more disputes and conjecture, especially if people claim different things. So I'll give like an example. In Chinese history, for instance, so we could look up the Chinese dynasties. Some of the early Chinese dynasties, people will say stuff like, oh, these were mystical dynasties, meaning the dynasties, after a certain point, they'll say, oh, yes, these were like real, these were historical. But then you go back further, and then people will say, like, I don't know, they're claiming it's myth or it's fake or something. So the mapping to the current, the AD BC Anno Domini, Year of the Lord system, then these things could be disputed. So what is known is the lineages, the genealogies as they're tracked. But as we've seen different civilizations come and meet together, then how exactly different civilizations' timelines join with one another, getting closer to the present time, we all share the same reality. But going back past, before different civilizations were in contact very much, these are some of the things that we don't really know, or at least it's not mainstream knowledge. And especially like places that are very separated from in time and place. So for example, if I ask a question like, what were the North American indigenous people doing during the 1600s? It's really hard to answer or know the answer to that question. You could ask the descendants of the people that lived there, try to work out a timeline or something, but it wouldn't be nearly as clear-cut as, say, maybe Chinese history in the past 500 years is relatively known because there's been a lot of exchange, not just with the West, but also with like India and some other civilizations. Okay, so we could talk about reign of kings, and then the problem or interesting thing I just brought up was you might have genealogies and stuff tracked, but lining them on a global world history thing might be an issue. Another way people have tracked time is from the foundation of cities. So ab urbe condita is Latin for the founding of a city. So rather than pinning the year to a particular ruler, you could pin it to when a city was officially established. And then here they give examples of Rome. And they say the mythical founding of Rome. Okay, and then here it's talking about the Hebrew calendar. So now we're going to get into some pretty, perhaps controversial waters for some people, which is the claim that the Jewish calendar, or you could say including the Christian tradition, which would follow, do they actually have the date since the foundation of the earth? So you could have individual rulers, these different lineages, foundation of a city. And then with the Jewish calendar, then they actually have been dating the world since they have a period of time where they estimate that the world begun. So if you heard the term like people who are new earthers, they believe in like new creation as opposed to something like deistic evolution, the world being bajillions of years old with random forces smashing against each other, and now we just happen to be in the age. People that will be like a new earth of a type of outlook will tend to give credit to some kind of system that's telling you about the age of the earth. So Anno Mundi, Latin in the year of the world. And let's see what this is about. So the exact year, we have some conflict depending on what you use as your base text to know the exact date. So there's the Masoretic, Hebrew Masoretic text of the Bible, and then there's the Greek Septuagint. And the numbers given by these will be a bit different. So here, the Earth would be something like a plus or minus 100 or 200 years. Something like that. Anyways, I don't think it's super essential to know the exact year of the Earth, but to know generally like the ballpark numbers that people give and why, I think that at least is worth knowing. So there is the year of the world. Okay, and then let's just look at this quickly about our current era. So the current system is the before Christ and Anno Domini epoch, which counts the years since the birth of Jesus Christ. More secular-minded people and scholars have transcribed the system into before current era BCE and current era CE to distance themselves from the use of Christ as a point to count the years. This system began its universal dominance in the Middle Ages and continued to spread through the Renaissance in conjunction with the Gregorian calendar, which we still use today. So counting years too in the calendar, you could have one and not the other. Like you could mix and match. And like Japan, for example, which we talked about, then they'll have the Japanese calendar for counting years and certain things, but then in all civil functions, effectively, they'll just use the Gregorian calendar. So there's no rule that says, you only have to use one calendar for everything. And I think for most people in most places, to have, at least not everybody's looking at the calendar all day, but to have at least one or more than one calendar going on for various stuff, I think that's quite common. Okay, as the world continued to become more connected and dependent on one another for trade, the need for a standard system of time became an urgent necessity. Throughout the Renaissance, from the days of the British Empire to today, people have continued to refine and share time in a universal manner. The modern economy is more interconnected than ever before, and the use of a single world calendar continues to be the norm. So going back to the idea of empire, standardized weights and measures, one thing, for example, I heard about is like time zones came about because of scheduling trains, like railroads and stuff. Because if you messed up, you might have two trains trying to use the same track at the same time, and that would spell trouble. So a lot of the reasons why there's all this different time zone stuff and a lot of effort, time and effort being put into calendars and clocks, even within the year, not just counting years, is to solve these very practical problems of coordinating people, labor, and so on. So now everyone in the world uses the same calendar to count the days and the years. Regional, historical, and religious calendars are still used by groups of people, but they are all largely used in conjunction with the universally accepted global calendar. So nowadays, basically, you have to use the global calendar. If you use, Windows or Mac OS or Linux or any of these big systems, or a smartphone, right, Android, iOS, you are on the main calendar by default. So any person that's connected to the internet, you are connected into global standardized time. So here's where the computer part comes in, that I found interesting. So if you've been following some of my streams, looking at some of my stuff, one of the topics I've been following is all this metaverse stuff, kind of looking at the form of the partially physical, partially digital world that is already upon us but continues to develop. And we could see with this time topic that, even before we all have like VR or AR headsets strapped to us and all that stuff happening, or, whatever sort of more immersive technology people are going for. Just bring up one of those so-called Internet of Bodies. They want to connect us all and run us on the same clock. Not even kidding. Like, the same clock, insofar as if this is all digital connected technology, you are going to have a unified, coordinated clock. And if you have people with wearable devices and all sorts of stuff interacting with this internet, what does that mean? It means you have all of community digitally connected on the same clock. So that's what it would quite literally be. Anyways, that's to say that a lot of the standardization, the starts of the things that we're seeing today, they've been brewing for decades. So, it's no, what would you call it? It's no exaggeration to say that, the world has become more interconnected. And by looking at a particular area, such as the standardization of the measurement of time, then you could see how this is so. So let's take a little look at some clock stuff. So here, I don't have one on me, but if you had like a wristwatch, a cheap wristwatch, is very likely a quartz watch. So this would be a very affordable standard clock that a person would have. And I'll probably look up more about how these work. I'm kind of curious, but I found this pretty short description, which I thought, I think I understand this high-level overview, so I'll just pull it up. So the battery provides a current to the microchip circuit, so you could have electricity going through the circuit, obeying the logic of the chip. The microchip circuit makes the quartz crystal, and the quartz crystal is precisely cut and shaped like a tuning fork. So if any of you have ever used a tuning fork before, let's take a look what one of those looks like. It's like a piece of metal that's a particular shape, and if you like hit it against a piece of wood and then hold it up to your ear, it will always give you the same tone. And it's a piece of metal, so it's durable. It's not going to be like a string on a guitar will wear out over time, but these things will be quite durable. And you would get one for consistency, so you always want to make some standard tone like an A440. It's just the name of a particular frequency note, whatever you want to call it. So you go, boo. Okay, that wasn't an A40. I don't have perfect pitch, but my pitch is good enough to know that wasn't the right note. And then you could listen to it, and you could like tune your voice, your instrument appropriately. And the point is, you manufacture a bunch of these forks in the same way you take the measurement. Then effectively you could have like a standardization of the sound or the music. So in the same way with these manufactured products, if you have a standardized way of producing like a quartz crystal, and I think quartz is very abundant and cheap, and you only need a very tiny quartz crystal to do this, then you could mass produce, all these clocks that work the same, only different by very, very small degree of error, such that, like, practically speaking, in your lifetime, assuming you don't have to change the clock for daylight savings or whatever, then you won't really have to adjust the time of the clock if it stays powered. All right. So the microchip circuit detects the crystal's oscillations and turns them into regular electric pulses, 1 per second. So the form of the crystal makes it so you could get pulses at a regular interval. Boop, 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 whatever. And electric pulses drive miniature electric stepping motor. So then the pulses will make some motor thing turn. Stepping, so like a stair, each step it's like a discrete defined unit. So even if you step a little bit higher than the step, you're still going to step onto the step. So by that way, having this sort of stepping mechanism, you keep things discrete, you keep things standard. And then the electric stepping motor will turn the gears, and then the gears will turn the clock hands. Or if you had like a digital display, rather than turning the hands of a clock, then the chip might like map the logic to like a LED display or something. Okay, so Quartz Clock, that still is not a networked machine, right? So that's a way to create a clock that consistently advances in a particular fixed way, right? That's why you would have a clock, and you could use like a little handheld stopwatch to train athletes, improve your running time, or whatever it is that you do. But still not social. That's an anti-social clock. So how do we get to having all the clocks talk with one another? Because ultimately that's the goal. You don't just want like your own clock, like your own heartbeat. If you're trying to standardize time, you want to be able to get everybody on the same clocks, right? Then you could coordinate everyone together because all the clocks are working the same way. If you have a handheld watch that isn't on a network or something, then you're still going to have to go and set it and synchronize it to a clock. Otherwise, people will be late for meetings or whatever. Okay, so let's just jump to slightly more sophisticated computer clocks. Stack exchange. let's ask questions. How are computers able to tell the correct time and date every time? When I close the computer, shut it down, all connections and processes inside it stop. How is it that when I open the computer again, it tells the exact correct time? Does the computer not shut down completely when I shut it down? Are there some processes still running in it? But then how does my laptop tell the correct time when I take out the battery and thus forcibly stop or process it and start it again after a few days? So not a dumb question at all. I think that's a pretty good question. So let's see how this is answered. Answer. Computers have a real-time clock, a special hardware device. So the clock is so essential to the computer that they're going to have a dedicated hardware component. So like, you do a lot of graphics You might have a dedicated graphics card in your machine. And likewise, every computer is going to rely on clocks to do some clocky stuff. So you're going to have a dedicated clock. And it might contain a quartz crystal. So just like the handheld watch, that basic stuff we were talking about, then the computer might build on that particular technology. But as we'll get into, computers were really revolutionary because they could talk with one another in a sense. You're able to network them, and they could do much more complex things. All right, so a special hardware device on the motherboard, a clock, that maintains the time. It is always powered even when you shut your computer off. Also, the motherboard has a small battery that is used to power the clock device even when you disconnect your computer from the power. So actually, I'm like looking at my own computer now. But if you look on like a motherboard or of a computer, you might even see like a little Koine battery, and it'd likely be like for a clock or something else, but probably a clock. We could even just search motherboard clock battery. Let's see what pops up. Yeah, the Cmos Battery. So let's take a look. Yeah, so here's like someone pointing to the Cmos Battery that deals with the clock on a motherboard. We could look up hp.com. Sounds legit. What is a Cmos battery? Oop, I clicked something. No Santa Claus with a rocket. Okay. What is the Cmos battery? How to remove and replace from a laptop. Okay, let's look at. Okay, so the Cmos battery, just for the BIOS. The BIOS is integrated in the computer when it's being manufactured. The basic input-output system. And I think among other things, it'll handle with some timekeeping. Anyways, this is not operating systems class. Probably stuff I got to look at a little bit more. But that is to say that clocks are essential to the functioning of a computer. Okay. The battery doesn't last forever. So this is going back to computer, laptop, whatever. But it will last at least a few weeks. This helps the computer keep track of the time even when your computer is shut off. The real-time clock doesn't need much power, so it's not wasting energy. If you take out the clock battery, in addition to removing the main battery and disconnecting the power cable, then the computer will lose track of time and will ask you to enter the time and date when you restart the computer. So I've had that happen to me before. Working with old computers, it like totally bonks out and loses all time recording. And here are another comment saying how this is the same on the phone. This is also the case with mobile phones. If you let a phone discharge, then not recharge it for more than a few weeks, it will also forget the time because the small auxiliary battery is discharged completely and nothing is powering on the real-time clock. Yeah, so in many ways it seems like a computer clock. You know, you could almost compare it analogously to like a human heart. Of course, people talk about how the heart has a heartbeat, it has a rhythm to it, right? And even if you go to sleep, your heartbeat continues beating if you're going to wake up the next day. And, there are cases where people's hearts do stop for a while, and using medical technologies and things, people can be brought back. But, generally if your heart stops, that's very serious. So computers and machines, the clock, insofar as the computer keeps on running, then the functioning of the clock seems kind of analogous here. All right, so here that was within an individual computer. Then they have a clock. Now let's look at one final thing here, the Network Time Protocol, or the NTP. So we looked at quartz clocks, then computer BIOS motherboard clock for a specific machine. Here we look at this thing, the Network Time Protocol. And here we get to how computers synchronize with one another. So the Network Time Protocol, NTP, is a networking protocol for clock synchronization between computer systems over packet-switched variable latency data networks. So that includes the interwebs, I think, because you send data packets. All right, some technical language here, but I think we could do it. In operation since 1985, okay? That's before I was born. NTP is one of the oldest internet protocols in current use. So as long as, personal computers went mainstream, at least, probably like the internet couldn't have come up without the Network Time Protocol. NTP is one of the oldest internet protocols in current use. NTP was designed by David L. Mills of the University of Delaware. Okay. NTP is intended to synchronize, so coordinate events, all participating computers to within a few milliseconds of coordinated universal time, or UTC. UTC is the primary time standard by which the world regulates clocks and times. And then it's based around Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. It uses the intersection algorithm, a modified version of Marzullo's algorithm, to select accurate time servers. So those are computers, time servers, a server computer that reads the actual time from a reference clock and distributes this information to its clients using a computer network. All right, and is designed to mitigate the effects of variable network latency. NTP can usually maintain time to within tens of milliseconds over the public internet and can achieve better than 1 millisecond accuracy. Local area networks under ideal conditions, asymmetric routes, and network congestion can cause errors of 100 milliseconds or more. So a lot of details and names there, but basically this protocol is what's used to keep all the clocks of the interwebs relatively synchronized together, right within milliseconds. And it's been around for a long time. So it looks like the standard has been updated. So it includes the added tools to find source of error. What else have they done? That's extremely non-descriptive. In subsequent years, as new features were added and algorithm improvements were made, so maybe they just made it faster. They got the errors or margin lower. Anyways, it would be interesting also to look at how they've upgraded this. So over time, have they just been able to get latency or error down? Or have they actually been trying to do various things? Maybe security updates. There's ways in which people could kind of attack this. All right. Well, we don't have time right here today to all become elite time hackers. But that's to say, the next development after quartz clocks on individual computers was then to get network time running, whereby all the computers could be talking with one another. And now we have all sorts of, effectively, time is standardized in our current time. Whether you're on Western, Chinese, or Russian internet, computer time is standardized. So one of the remarkably standardized things of our time, despite it being a very, very complex subject. So let's just look at a couple more topics here. Unix time. So here is our current Unix time, 1639697707, and then you could translate that into a bit more human readable thing. Let's read what this is about. Unix time, also known as epoch time, POSIX time, seconds since the epoch or Unix epoch time, is a system for describing a point in time. It is the number of seconds that have elapsed since the Unix epoch, excluding leap seconds. So, of course, as you divide time down more, then, everyone knows what a leap year is. What's a leap second, right? So this problem of time is very difficult and complex to do, even with all the resources we have available to us. But there are leap seconds. Leap second is a 1 second adjustment that is occasionally applied to Coordinated Universal Time, UTC, to accommodate the difference between precise time and imprecise observed solar time. Okay. So the Unix epoch is 000000 UTC on the 1st of January 1970, which they say is an arbitrary date. They were just like, all right, the Unix epoch starts now. And the people making it, seems like they just chose that day just because. So Unix time is non-linear, with a leap second having same Unix time as the second before it, so that every day is treated as if it contains exactly 86,400 seconds, with no seconds added to or subtracted from the day as a result of positive or negative leap seconds. Due to the treatment of leap seconds, Unix time is not a true representation of UTC. Okay, so we don't have to go into the details, but the point is, even with giant super mega computers and all of this, just because the very issue of time, thinking about using time, is complex, that even right in our current year, even in the Unix epoch, there's still like workarounds and things like leap seconds that must be taken into account. And for this reason, always working, essentially, I think everybody who works with time related stuff, they're going to use some kind of software library. Like, unless you're an actual specialist, nobody actually interfaces with date time stuff themselves. And it's like, if we look at a programming language, like here's Google's Go language, the one thing to expect in any kind of programming language would be where's the reference? Okay. Would be some kind of library that has to deal with dates and time, and it's like a language feature. So it's like in English we do stuff, but the certain meanings, certain words and stuff are kind of just given to work with. In a programming language, it's the same way. For a programming language to be considered like industry usable or something, essentially it's going to have to include a whole bunch of common functionalities. So this Go language by Google, for instance, we could see that they have their time library, and then this time library will be used to, like get the current time, add dates, subtract dates, write dates, format dates, all sorts of stuff like this. Because to actually do this yourself would be a major pain, and you probably wouldn't do it unless someone's paying you to do it, or you're training yourself to get paid to do it, because it's a lot of details and a lot of precision is required. All right. So Unix time, we could see how we have all this technology implemented interesting stuff. Now, where things get more interesting is to look at how, okay, as a world, we standardize time together in all these ways. There have been, there are some culturally relevant computer and time related things that are kind of, you could call them a artifact of the engineering. So artifact of engineering, this might be a useful term to use. Okay, engineering artifacts. Oh no, that's not what I was looking for. Artifact in software development. Okay, well anyways, you could think of it kind of like a sort of glitch, a problem, a kind of idiosyncrasy, something that's not quite consistent, a little bit off, that's a result of the way in which a problem was solved through technical means. So let's take a look at something that happened within my lifetime, the year 2000 problem, or the Y2K problem, the Millennium Bug, year 2000 problem. So what happened here? The Y2K error refers to potential computer errors related to the formatting and storage of calendar data for dates in and after the year 2000. Many programs represented 4-digit years with only the final 2 digits, making the year 2000 indistinguishable from 1900. Computer systems' inability to distinguish dates correctly had the potential to bring down worldwide infrastructures for industries ranging from banking to air travel. In the years leading up to the turn of the century, the public gradually became aware of the Y2K scare, and individual companies predicted the global damage caused by the bug would require anything between 400 million and 600 billion to rectify. A lack of clarity regarding the potential dangers of the bug led some to stock up on food, water, and arms, purchase backup generators, and withdraw large sums of money in anticipation of a computer-induced apocalypse. Contrary to public expectations, few major errors actually occurred in 2000, primarily due to the preemptive action of many computer programmers and information technology experts. Companies and organizations in some countries, but not all, had checked, fixed, and upgraded their computer systems to address the problem. Then U.S. President Bill Clinton, who organized efforts to minimize the damage in the United States, labeled Y2K as the first challenge of the 21st century successfully met. And retrospectives on the event typically commend the programmers who worked to avert the anticipated disaster. So, maybe, I don't know how much of this is hype, but it seems like it would be a success case in engineering, and that people might notice, oh, you know, we represent years with only 2 digits. This could cause a problem, and then people updated their software in anticipation of this, and then lo and behold, oh yes, you know, we're good for another 9,000 years or whatever. But this was a problem that, you know, if all documents are handwritten, this would not be a problem. It was an artifact of engineering in the sense, if you recorded years by a digital, you know, 2-digit thing, then the way that you're storing a year and adjusting stuff is kind of conditioned by the technology you're using. The representation of a year is a engineering artifact in this way. And so by upgrading systems, making the data format richer, this particular Y2K problem could be solved. But at the time, it seems a bunch of people were freaking out. I didn't know anyone that personally really was freaking out, but I do remember hearing about this, even though I was not very old then. Okay, let's look at the 2038 problem, a kind of sequel to the Y2K problem. So the year 2038 problem, also called Y2038 Apocalypse, Unix Y2K, relates to representing time in many digital systems as the number of seconds pass since 000000 UTC on the 1st of January 1970 and storing it as a unsigned 32-bit integer. So signed means you know if it's positive or negative. Such implementations cannot encode time after this particular date, UTC, January 2038. Similar to the Y2K problem, the Y2038 problem is caused by an insufficient number of digits chosen to represent time. So at the time when some system, such as, any computer system, you're going to have to make a choice about how the data is stored. And then as time goes on, you might say like, oh, we actually needed more storage, more data. So before, it could have been too expensive. You didn't have enough storage or whatever in order to add that extra capability. But then as computers have got more powerful, then people could just be more liberal in giving, more generous in giving just more memory for stuff. It's like, I don't think we're going to be using this for whatever 10,000 years, but we'll just like give tons of extra space just because the cost is it's worth it to spend more for that cost than to have to like upgrade or change the system. Something like that. Oh, actually, to come to think of it, so something similar to this, like how you represent a number in memory, was actually YouTube Gangnam Style like counter. YouTube, there was this video. Here, we'll look at BBC. So this video, quote, broke the YouTube view limit because YouTube, they counted the number of likes using representing numbers in a particular way. And then this video was set to actually get more likes than the maximum number of likes allowed by how YouTube was programmed at that time. So then YouTube had to do like a software fix. So now, you know, the millions or how many YouTube videos there are, they're all given like, you know, a byte more of data allocated to them, or however much Google decided to add, which when you do the multiplication, you know, it could turn into terabytes and terabytes of data. But if you potentially have a video or something that's way more popular than that, then you might be kind of forced to do that sort of, what will you call it? Not trimming down, not optimizing to make stuff more efficient, slimmer, but instead allowing for some more wiggle room because stuff could get big. Okay, so that's related to like this 2038 problem, and that it has to deal with how numbers are represented in computers. All right. So, let us jump into, we talked about years, how they're kept and tracked throughout history. Then we looked at clocks, and then computers and how computers are synchronized. UTC time, they're all network time protocol. They're all connected in this particular way. So we got everybody on standardized time. What's next? So I wanted to bring up a very, very rough timeline of internet development. The so-called Web 1.0 or the static websites. These would be like, you could think of them as non-interactive websites, like a website that's basically like a piece of paper. So maybe a restaurant might have its menu posted online and nobody's submitting comments or doing anything. It's just a page that's displayed. That's like Web 1.0. Then Web 2.0, the so-called dynamic websites. Now these are websites you could interact with. So you, the user, could send data to them. It could get stored, change the website, and so on. So like Facebook, Twitter, all these sites, these would all fall under the dynamic website category. And that arose alongside the mobile internet. So people using their phones with apps, those would all be kind of Web 2.0 technology. Oh, and I'll say that this first one, Web 1.0, the static websites, that came alongside the popularization, the widespreadness of the personal computer. Now, let's ask the question, where are we going from here? So people are already talking about the Web 3.0, which not just cell phones and stuff, people are talking about augmented reality. So think Pokemon Go, that type of thing. And then the Internet of Things. So like, you press a button and your toaster gives you toast. Or you could make your Roomba go to a different room so the vacuum cleaner doesn't annoy you. That sort of thing. This would be Web 3.0. And it seems that's the direction the internet's going into. So to get Web 1.0, just to have all sorts of computers talking with one another, the internet is like a big network of computers, then you would have to solve the problem not just of the Quartz Clock, but computers all sharing the same time, because it's just like railroads. If we think of the internet, it's kind of like an information superhighway, this type of thing. It's just like the trains. You're going to need clocks in order to make sure all the data packets and stuff aren't colliding, because you'll have programs that will do things like, send these packets. Oh, if it doesn't send successfully, like wait a brief randomized amount of time and then try again, right? So that a lot of the lower level technologies are built around like clock and time sort of mechanics. So it was necessary to solve these time problems before getting the internet in place. Now that the time problem is kind of solved, just like we figured out time zones. If you didn't figure out time zones and get that at least in a workable system, then you couldn't have like, even if you have airplane technology, you wouldn't be able to have airplanes all around the world, because you wouldn't want to be flying a bunch of airplanes if they were crashing into each other left and right. So there's more problems. Not only do you have to have the technology to do flight and do all that, but then you have to have the technology in place to coordinate that. And that's where the timekeeping, the time technology, and in our modern era, the clocks. And now the clocks that talk to each other. So there's clocks first, and then the clocks that talk to each other. That's computers and the internet. And now we've seen computers in the sandbox of just computers doing computer things, but also working with digital money. But still, it's all zeros and ones. The computers haven't really reached out far and started to like touch the people beyond like monitors and screens and stuff. Now I think what we could expect to see more of in the Web 3.0 era, where we have more augmented reality, Internet of Things, drones, robots, all sorts of stuff like this, is now the universal time, the network time, right? It could control not just boxes that sit there and do nothing, but they're going to be able to control all these objects and stuff in the real world. So let's just give an example of something like this. So, for example, on this channel, we've talked about robots. So if we let's look at like McDonald's, see what kind of burger flipping technology there is. So let's look at an automated McDonald's drive-thru. So probably orders there. Customers are ordering on a screen, and then maybe a lot
Welcome
of
back to Squawk Box. I'm Kate Rogers with some news on McDonald's.
Cooking is being done by robots.
Wages at its company.
No, don't show me still photos. I want to see some robos. Oh, that's Chipotle. Show me a burger flipping robot. All right. All right, we'll go.
Robots.
All right, Dave Rubin. No, Dave Rubin. I want to see the robots. Okay, so maybe searching McDonald's specifically wasn't the best search, but you can find these robots. Okay, maybe 2015, no. Okay, anyways, the point here that I was going to make was that you could have, just like you could say your app for your phone if you order food from somewhere. The app is it's connecting with a central server. So you might actually be like interfacing much more directly with like McDonald's Corporation as opposed to like a person at a counter at a store. So you could get systems to be a lot more centralized. So in the same way as we get to Web 3.0 land, then you might have these things. You could think of them like another way to talk about this would be they're like gigantic walk-in vending machines. Okay, so like a vending machine, you don't need to have any person there. You might even just swipe your phone and have like my favorite orders or something, and then the vending machine could automatically dispense a product. So if you could have like fast food restaurants or whatever, you order however you choose to order, and then you just pick up food from like a little cubby or something like that, then this would be the next kind of logical step of the internet getting out of the box. You've unchained the digital world into the real world. And all of this, of course, will be dependent on clocks. You need to synchronize the system. So, of course, your ordering device, whether you go up to a panel or you use your phone or there's some other mechanic by which you order, and then the facility itself, they're all going to be able to be on the same clock such that they could fulfill the service in a timely manner, and that the robot, you're going to have a bunch of different customers all fielding requests to these like automated restaurants and stuff like that. So a lot of people making requests to like a restaurant. So think now you have a lot of people making requests to like YouTube's web servers. YouTube provides a service. A lot of people go to YouTube to request videos, and then YouTube gives them videos. So all of this is in digital product land, in that we're all able to interface with this YouTube system, request digital product, be delivered a digital product. Now we have food delivery and stuff, but there's a lot of people that are involved in the process soon. But what we could see a lot of coming is you replace more and more of the human positions with machines or with systems, and so it's not just you have these servers running and it's only the computer that's taking the orders that's synchronized to a particular server. Then you have the things that are making the pizzas themselves, the things that are making the burgers themselves, all these different machines connected to the same clock. Then I think that's a direction a lot of people are trying to develop with the Web 3.0 going into the future. So how is that related to clocks? Well, just think about this, right? In a kind of industrial society, it's very common for people to clock into work. So already a lot of the systems that we have, they're based on time management in a sense, right? You have everybody going at a particular time, doing assigned tasks, and you set up everything according to a timetable. If you're able to get that kind of setup in place, then everything will run like clockwork, right? Like that's the very idea of it, that using a mechanical clock, then you run an operation in a systematic way, and everything is predictable and falls into place exactly how you like it. So this is like a type of technique, as Jacques Ellul talked about in this book, The Technological Society. Check out my previous streams if you aren't familiar with this. The Technological Society. So the clocks are like a mechanical heartbeat of a sort of not organic, planets, different seasons, human heart, menstrual cycles even, right? There's like a natural rhythm to life. Then what you have with clocks and with computers is a sort of artificial rhythm to life. And what we're seeing is that the human natural rhythm of life, the normal operations of the universe, is being suppressed more and more. And then on top of that, we're having this clock run universe put into place. And this clock run universe is touching more and more different areas of lives. So we talk about everything getting more and more connected, something like that. One way to look at that from a rather raw technical kind of view is you're getting more and more things hooked up to computer systems, which means you're getting more and more things hooked up to the same clock, to UTC time, whatever it is that we're talking about. Cool. All right, so that's about all I have for today's topic about years, clocks, and computers. I'll just allude to a couple more topics that might be worth going into in the near future. And the first is just generally this idea of standardization of weights and measures. So here we're talking about the standardizations of weights and measures of time specifically, but if we look throughout the past couple hundred years especially, how units and weights have been standardized, this has been one of the hugely influential steps that needed to take place to integrate the world more as we've seen it today. As you integrate standards, you get standardized weights and measures, then you could integrate stuff. If people are using different weights and measures, just like two people speak two different languages, they don't talk to each other as easily. Now you get everyone using the same weights and measures. They could work together. Even if they don't even speak the same language, they could work together. So standardization of weights and measures has been very huge in a lot of especially tech and science stuff. And here, this very thing in this particular stream, the problem of tracking time, quite a complex thing. Like we were even talking about leap seconds. So not like elegantly solved even. They're pretty well solved, but not totally elegantly solved. But you would need to have the time problem solved, the clock stuff solved, or else you're going to have like burgers and pizzas smashing against each other in the drive-thru, right? So, we have this solved. So now we could expect robo pizzas and robo burgers. Reaper says you forgot to talk about M time. Oh, okay. So Reaper's making an allusion to we have a mutual friend who has explored additional time ways of representing and keeping time. So I could actually, all I know about is on my own github.com/Captain Allen. I made a clock here. Where's my clock? 36 time. Actually, I was thinking about this today because I think we're on stream number 36. So our mutual friend Emily made up this system that was based on the number of 36. So time is divided such that you have 36 hours per day, 36 minutes per hour, 36 seconds per minute. And so with this sort of system, you could make a clock. So I was getting triggered by the fact that I have a 41 here. I was thinking, how could that be if I'm only supposed to have 36 hours per day? So did I blow up my mind? It's 4:51 p.m. So let's just put that 16 or 52:00. No, that would be right. Okay, so I don't know. Okay, I'm bending my mind. I don't want to think about numerals and integers on this. But that's to say, yeah, thinking of this question of how you represent time. That's an interesting thing. Cool. Reaper says a big write-up on the XAW site about it. Okay, XAW. Okay, so XAW Lee made a huge write-up. He has a stream. And then skilled programmer Emily actually programmed a little watch face that used this system. And all this Emacs, Lisp, Ruby, Erlang. Anyways, fun programming problems. If you want to practice your programming foo. Cool. All right, and then my last topic here to talk about later, but related to times and clock, is that of interest rates. So why bring up interest rates? Well, if we're talking about using clocks, things like this, in order to make things more efficient, to develop our technique in some sort, why would you want to run like a factory on clocks as opposed to just say, oh yeah, just come in when a little bit after the sun rises and go home whenever. A lot of the reason why we have all these clocks, these things running and we respond to them, is for the reason of efficiency of some kind. So for that reason, you want to have efficiency to make money, right? So that company would do all this clock stuff in order to make more money. So a related topic would be that of interest rates, because if you could get everything on a clockwork system, you could predict exactly how stuff is going to go, and calculate, okay, we have this and this error rate, but assuming all these things are in place and giving ourselves some wiggle room in this way, we're going to make profit at this distinct rate. Then yeah, you're a very patient person and you set up a system brilliantly. Well, lo and behold, using mechanics like interest rates, you could take over the world. Oh, Reaper explained my own problem. I forgot how it worked for me, which is 30. Where did my link go? Reaper says each digit goes to 6. Okay, so that's why I was confused. Then in this time system, right, the number 0, 3, 4, and this is all laggy because it's based off of like a decimal, like a normal clock. But then I tried to smash everything together and get it to work with this other time format, but I didn't bother to program it carefully. I just said it'll be generally right when you look at it. So now you know why I'm not employed programming clocks. But yeah, Reaper's right here. So the system 33, 34, 35, and then once this hits 6, it doesn't go to 6, it goes to 0, and that goes to a 4. So it's a base 6 representation. So this isn't like 41 here because it's a base 6 representation. So it would be like, 6 to the 4th plus 1. Something like that. I'm not going to do 6 to the 4th plus 1 in my head, but if you're mathy, I'm sure you get the idea. All right, cool. So I think that about does it with all the content I have for today. Years, clocks, computers, and more. So much to look into on this topic. And okay, one more final note. Yeah, so what I'm ending saying about like things like interest rates and Web 3.0 and all this stuff is to say, if you're trying to make there to be more automation in the world, I think that is one of the general goals of hooking a lot of stuff up to computers, which will mean hooking stuff up to clocks. If you have a clock, a systematic way to do things, then you could have a world in which no one flips burgers anymore because you have burger flipping literally being done by machines on a clock. And so you could have people that are more free to make Allen stream, to go for a walk, to do other things. That, I think, is the kind of utopian sort of vision that people have when they're trying to hook up everything to clocks and to automate things. And you could find, like on YouTube, tons and tons of people that are just making various, fun inventions. The Rube Goldberg machines would be a representative example of just people having fun with automation. And these are more like a what would you call it? It's not like a clock like UTC time, right? This is a more kind of crude, fun, hacky looking version. But, just think this same general idea, but hooked up to, Arduino board, a Linux computer. And instead of just having stuff like this happening, it's making you burgers and pizza. It's the same sort of thing that you're trying to do, where it's like, you hang back and it's like, wow, build this really complex, cool system, and all these things happen in sequence, just as I intend. And how fun and wonderful is it? That's the utopian effort, the dream, whatever you want to call it, that I think is motivating a lot of people to continue to want to build technology, basically. All right, this one, it looks like it actually does something. It actually builds lemons. Whoa. Anyways, this is going to be a full 9 minutes, so I'm not going to watch the whole thing. But, yeah. So if you just hook this up to a computer, even if it's just a switch, pretend you hook this all up to a computer, and then you run the program, lemonade.exe, enter, and then it triggers this whole sequence. Now just do that at global scale, and lo and behold, you have a formula for world domination. So on that note, I thank everybody who has come to the stream for joining. Like, subscribe, do all that YouTube stuff.